Here we are with another episode of Solutionaries. I'm your host, Michael DiMartino. Thanks for taking a few moments of your precious time and energy to watch this show. You know, there's so many options out there, but we try to really cut right to the chase with amazing avatar level solutionaries that are doing incredible work in their bioregions and communities. And part of the show is we talk about some of the issues and most importantly, some of the solutions, and really highlight what individuals and organizations are doing both here in California, around the country, and sometimes around the world. So I'm deeply honored today to have my next guest on the show. I actually, coincidentally, we met each other up in the northern coast of California, just north of Marin and Bolinas during a rainy day there. And we had a great discussion, and we've been developing a friendship, and I have a world of respect for his work, along with Yoshia and what he's doing in Yuba County. So I want to introduce our next solutionary, Stephen Dambeck from Yubakami. So welcome.
Thank you.
So I know you do a lot of things, but maybe briefly, you can just give anyone who's watching this a little bit of history about who you are and what got you into this whole movement around food security and regenerative agriculture.
Actually, that's a harder question. I'll try to get back into that.
Okay.
It's just the only place where there's sanity, I think, is the right answer. I've been in agriculture for over 40 years. Growing, wow. Making olive oil, making wine. But mostly now what I do is I represent very small farmers who are on the edge of not being viable, trying to keep them functioning by finding them the right solutions to some of the auxiliary efforts, auxiliary to farming. Are you still there, Michael?
Yes, I'm just turning my camera off for better bandwidth because I know there's a little bit of slow internet today with the heat. So thank you.
Good. So just what I do is that there are really good farmers here. And when I say really good, I mean people who care about the soil, care about biodiversity. They're just like normal craftsmen, like farmers are supposed to be. And of course, when you farm that way, it's more expensive and you have other issues. And if you're a farmer, then you don't necessarily market well or distribute well, good accounting. So after all these years of farming myself, I'm more trying to help them connect. Partly a little bit on the land, trying to give them a little bit of support on whatever their regenerative strategies are. But primarily, I aggregate what they do. I find places to sell it and ways to distribute it. And right now, that's
and Stephen, where is here? You're in Yuba County, so maybe people are watching this outside, but you're in the Sierra Nevada foothills, correct?
That's right, Sierra Nevada foothills, Northern California, about 2,000 feet. Very small county. And down in the valley, in the flatland of the Central Valley, there's really big agriculture, commodity farming. They send their stuff to around the country in China and wherever. But we're talking about people typically with an acre to 5 acres, maybe 10 acres.
Wow, so you really are in the breadbasket of California agriculture there in the northern part of Central Valley, it's citrus belt, right?
Well, where we are is kind of interesting. I wouldn't call us a breadbasket because we're, I think about big farming, but the benefit of where we are is that 12 months out of the year, we generate good crops. So we do have a citrus belt, but not most of the area where I am. So within, stone's throw of each other, we can grow citrus and apples, which is fairly rare. And we have a growing season 12 months out of the year for different kinds of things. And that's another thing we're trying to encourage is farming seasonally with an understanding that, especially with climate change, summer farming may be less favorable than fall, winter, and spring farming and trying to conserve water.
Right. And of course, in California right now, I know water is a huge concern. And you're probably just, 100 and some odd miles south of Mount Shasta area, which is kind of where the coastal range and the Sierra Nevadas kind of meet, and a lot of the snow melt kind of drains into that area. And I know there's been issues with drought, and we'll talk maybe in a minute about some of the issues too that face people there. But why is the work that you're doing so important around the concept of food security? We've all heard about victory gardens and stuff. So, why is it important? Because you have farmers who want to take it to market, but really, what keeps you inspired to do this incredible amount of work and heavy lifting to move the community forward?
Well, this may sound like lunatic fringe stuff, Michael, but when you talk about food security, I work with for food banks and things like that. These guys need food. Mostly in a food bank, they're getting highly processed foods that supermarkets are willing to give them because they're meeting their expiration dates. All they really need is living food. What I'm trying to offer is beyond that. So for example, if you have a homebound elder who's been eating packaged stuff, and they can have a real cabbage or a real carrot, or when I say real, I mean that in a relative way, stuff you can get out of a Winco or a Safeway, or even organically certified out of Walmart. These are not highly living foods, but they're much better than what these guys have been eating. What I'm trying to do is beyond that, because stuff that you get in the supermarket, including, please forgive me if I sound outrageous, but including almost everything that's organically certified these days, the soils that they're coming out of are not alive anymore. There's no biodiversity. There's no kami. The name of my business is Yubakami, because Yuba is where I am. And kami is the Shinto idea that everything is alive. There are living spirits and everything. And I chose the name because I wanted to keep people aware of the microbes, the soil, the stuff that you can't see, the invisible stuff is really the important stuff. So where I stand is that if you have a cabbage that's conventional or a cabbage that's organically certified at Walmart, the difference between those two is 2 units apart. But if you get a cabbage that's deeply soil by a farmer who's paying attention and cares, those are separated from the organically certified product cabbage by 10 or 20 points. There's a huge difference in the living quality of the food. That's important from one microbiome to the internal microbiome, but it's also important because our planet has so little living soil left. So to inculcate an idea in a farmer and support a farmer who's willing to grow living soil and to live in harmony with it. So it feels a little.
Absolutely, not to interrupt, but you're talking really about the soil food web. I know right now that Sadhguru is on a global tour talking about that we've lost about, I think it's about 70 to 80% of our agricultural rich soil on the planet, our nutrient rich soil. A lot of that is because of climate change and acidification of the environment and, contaminants from industry, et cetera, et cetera. So it's fascinating to hear you talk about this. And also, as you know, we had a spontaneous meeting in Sedona with someone who was talking about the work of Rudolf Steiner with Waldorf education. And very much a big part of that is about these other elements to agriculture, other elements to life, quality of life, our relationship to our environment spiritually, which of course is, like you were saying, this idea of in Shinto, the foundational spiritual belief of, these are living organisms and entities. So incredibly fascinating. And of course, there's been a lot of films that have come out, like The Biggest Little Farm, Dirt Rich, And I just saw one need to grow recently, and people are starting to realize, as you see with the uprising in Sri Lanka and India, it's not just about how much chemical fertilizer can we keep putting onto the soil to make things grow, which is destroying the soil. It's creating a healthy biome, very much like in our stomach, in our guts, in our intestines, but creating a healthy soil that starts to recontribute to supplementing the soil so it's nutrient rich, and even our food, like you said, is much healthier and better. And of course, right now we have permaculture, we have regenerative agriculture, we have biodynamic agriculture, we have biological farming, and then we have other models. But it's just a really fascinating time where our concept of agriculture and self-sustainability, food security is kind of mushrooming and exploding. But at the same time, we're seeing a collapse in large, commercially ready, available food. And I know there's a lot of concern about food security and food supply. So such a great point. So what are some of the principles that you utilize in this concept of soil wealth or regenerative agriculture?
Well, the number one thing, Michael, is psychological. So if you have a person who is extracting as much as possible from his or her land without being reciprocal in any way, you're creating a human being that's in some way damaged. I feel very flexible about the idea about what strategies, what tactics you use to enhance your soil, to keep everything flowing in the ecosystem. What I care more about is your attitude. So he's a partnership between themselves and the land, and has some kind of constantly deepening empathy to the soil, to the native fauna and flora, then they're on the right track. That's all I really care about. And one of the things I want to emphasize is that not only is creating much more nutrient dense food and something that's actually going to sustain people over time in their personal microbiome, but they're creating themselves as a person at the same time. That to me is absolutely essential to what we're trying to do. The kind of person who's exploitive is not somebody that can actually be harmonious with you in a community. We're trying to create people who work together well, human to human, learn to work together well with bacteria and fungus and everything else that comes into their zone. So for me, the focus isn't, if somebody's biodynamic, great. If somebody has another theory about, it just doesn't matter to me. You can, in the same way you can taste the living food, you can also taste a person who's going to produce that living food by the attitude they bring to their farming. I can give you an example, Michael.
Wow,
young farmer.
That's fantastic. And I don't mean to interrupt you, just to contemplate that. I know, in here in Crestone, where I'm living right now, in a lot of religious and spiritual centers, the whole idea is prasadam, or spiritual food that's been imbued with good intention, food that's been prepared with love and kindness. It's cultivated in a conscious way that's symbiotic with the people that are growing it. We also have an institute here called Shumei. And Shumei is a global institute based on Shinto principles that does what's called, they call it natural agriculture. And it's really this the same kind of concept where, we don't see ourselves as separate from nature. We have a relationship that's synergistic and symbiotic, but also that we heal and transform this, what I call the extractive capitalist mindset that is so ingrained here in these, Eurocentric and colonial cultures, even the way that we have related to indigenous communities, Native American communities, the horrific injustices that's been done. And now we're starting to learn about, I have a friend who teaches in Chico, she's Maidu, about traditional ecological knowledge, that, you know, the way that they stewarded the forest and took care of the rivers. It's not like they just didn't steward it and left it alone. It became a natural garden. And we can see with the fires right now and some of the stuff happening, that when the early settlers came here, there was a enormous effort and unified effort to steward and to work in relationship with the natural world to create optimal spiritual, mental, physical, and emotional health. So a fascinating point to touch on, you know, and again, talking about food security and regenerative ag. It's not like we're just talking about what things you put in the soil and here's the pH and, you know, stop putting in petroleum fertilizers, but you're actually opening up this whole door of awareness about the human relationship, this social permaculture that is so crucial and important. So I just wanted to add that. So again, please continue. This is a fascinating discourse.
Well, good. I'm glad you emphasized that. You mentioned Maidu. So we actually live in land where the Maidu used to live, and we have a fairly good idea of how they lived, a deepening idea of how they tended the wild. One of the things that it shifts, I think all of us were raised with the ideas that there are hunter-gatherers and then there's farmers. And the hunter-gatherers came first, and they just walked around and they whatever they could find. Finally, there was farming, you domesticate, then you can have cities and you can have culture. But what the Native Americans, especially the ones in California, because I know that better, what they did was something between hunting and gathering and farming. The word that's being used now is tending. They tended their land. And what we understand more and more, though, the tradition's been so fractured, it's hard to really know how our predecessors here lived 200 years ago. The picture that is emerging is that a family would, for we're talking about thousands of years, more or less take care of that grove of black oaks over there and work with these rushes over here and weave from baskets from those plants over there, use those medicinals. So what would happen is as they migrated back and forth in the course of the year and visited the places that I'm avoiding the word that were theirs. They didn't own this land, but they would go to black oak areas where they were collecting the acorns, and they might do a little pruning, or might do a little fire around the trees in a controlled way to stimulate growth and to keep competition down. So they were kind of half farming, a term that I guess tending is better. And it's a very beautiful psychological space where you and this land are intimately bound, and ancestors will be bound with your great-grandchildren. And so you care for it. And you care for it partly because you're going to receive the acorns next year or 2 years from now, a little bit better because of the tending that you did, but also because it's what you do. Like with your child, you change their diapers, you tend to them. So being a human is a very strong, you have potential, a lot of power that you can use, and using that power for tending is maybe the optimal human condition.
And also realizing we're part of a huge circle of creation, even though we've kind of appointed ourselves to be at the top of the pyramid in the hierarchy to control, extract, and manipulate. But really, and we're seeing this more and more every day, that we're really part of this huge circle or this web of life. I think it's really fascinating. Years ago, I did a special about, I'm going to call it Sutter Buttes, which is more the colonial name that was given to it. I don't want to try to mispronounce the indigenous name of it, but Sutter Buttes, which is located in the Central Valley north of Sacramento, which was at one time an inland lake because of all the glacial and snow melt from the Coast Range and the Sierra Nevada. Although a lot of the rivers and creeks have been dammed, and there's been less water flow in those. But at one point, Sutter Butte was an actual, it's one of the largest volcanoes in North America, but it was an inland botanical garden where, in my understanding, a lot of indigenous people, because of the elevations, the different microclimates, the different types of soil, and the different points of access to water, some of it's saline and more like a slurry of saline waters coming in from the San Francisco Bay Area, and some pure glacial waters, that they actually use that as a place where they generated a lot of seeds and crops and different varietals of things that would be taken out from Sutter Buttes and brought to different regions to help, like you said, to steward in partnership with nature these other communities of food security, food abundance, and different types of plants, medicines, fruits, berries, and other types of legumes and root vegetables and stuff. So it was really fascinating because Sutter Butte was such a key place for California in indigenous agriculture, going back, again, hundreds of years and even thousands of years. And Yubakami, you're pretty close to. I think you can actually see it at sunset. But a really fascinating area. I know right now there's a lot of large agriculture throughout that region, up through Chico and Redding. There's almonds and rice fields and stuff. But I want to congratulate you because you really found such an amazing location to do your work. And as you know, bringing a very essential component to the community there of how to not only expand the awareness around our relationship to nature and agriculture, but also helping people there that are desperate. I mean, we're seeing other parts of the world that farmers are struggling, and a lot of farmers in the country are in their late 60s, 70s, and 80s and are retiring, and a lot of farmland is being bought up and turned into development. I mean, there's so many issues right now. But if just to go back a little bit, briefly, what are some of the biggest issues you feel right now? And I know we've touched on them about human beings' relationship to the environment, agriculture right now, and then we'll kind of get towards wrapping up. We'll start to bring in again some of these solutions of again, what can people do? Because this is it can be a lot for people to change their whole paradigm of thinking. But what are some of the real big issues that you face there in Yuba County?
Well, I would say we're very lucky with many things: our soil, our water, our isolation. I didn't choose this place. I somehow found myself here, and now feel part of it, just part of its ecosystem. So let me just say that the biggest challenge that I see is that a real farmer operates under tremendous disadvantages because of the way the global food system works. The global food system creates cheap food, cheap to the consumer, heavy on costs to the land and many other things, air, water, humans, but also ultimately high cost to the health of the consumer as well. So, but it's very hard to convince people of that. It's very hard to find the extra funding that it takes to pay for a beautifully grown melon as opposed to a Walmart melon. People just cannot see the difference. That's, if I would say, the biggest challenge is that people have been systematically duped over the last couple of generations into thinking that they're eating living food, and they're not, even when it's it's a vegetable that's better than Cracker Jacks. It's still not alive.
Right.
They just don't see the difference, and they can't find the extra dollar to pay for it.
Wow, great point. And also the fact that I know in California, because of the so-called drought conditions, they've literally shut down thousands of small farms that are these crucial nodes to curing the illness of healthy food deserts. Like you said, I mean, there's places even in urban areas where you cannot find healthy food, and you know, even areas that have like a more challenging economic environment, you go there and everything is bagged and processed and nothing organic, and you know, sodas and just kind of what's made accessible to people. So it's been really eye-opening and slightly horrifying, but it's also part of it is to wake people up and I think and empower them to take responsibility for their own health and their own thing. We can't, you know, always count on everyone else to do these things, but just the fact that again, so many farms have been shut down, and I know a lot of farms have had in the Midwest a lot of their subsidies potentially removed, and a lot of huge farms are being shut down, and a lot of that is part of this natural change of like we can't go with the petroleum based huge agrogarchies anymore that, like you said, they're growing, you know, a billion Walmart melons that have no value. So it's amazing to see everything you're talking about, that there is a process of transformation and change happening right now. And it might be slow, it might accelerate, but I think what you're doing and the idea of food security has become much more forefront of people's awareness over the last couple of years of, you know, that which name I won't say because we hear enough of it in the media. So kudos to you, and helping to really be a pioneer and a solutionary to bring this type of awareness, and even helping farmers bring their stuff to market, because even just growing food alone is more than a full-time job.
Can I say a couple more things before we close?
Please.
I'd like to start with the idea of the Sutter Buttes that you mentioned. They're close to here. As you say, when we go up my little mountain, I can see them. It's an amazing place. It's the smallest mountain range in the world. So on our planet, there are rules governing what a mountain range is. It's a mountain range. It's really small, and it's incredibly beautiful. It's from the sky, looking down, it's completely circular. And it was very sacred for the Native for a long distance around here. But it's dead now. It's not recoverable. The tradition has been broken. The land has been used the way us white guys have used things for too many generations. The tradition is broken. What we can do is take the inspiration and the lessons and then reinvent them from who we are, including the fact I'm a white Jewish guy. So it has to flow through me, and it has to flow more importantly through the land that I stand on. So I just want to tell one story about a little farm, tiny little farm began. But to emphasize for myself, Michael, I can't begin to conceive, or I mean, I've tried for a couple of decades, but I've kind of stopped thinking about anything bigger. The problems are just so massive and too painful for me to contemplate. But if I can be part of growing a more joyful community, a more self-supporting community, add one person at a time that delights in a well-grown peach, that's the way I feel like the forward movement is. That is, instead of preaching, instead of working through governments, work through people that you know, and see if you can build a community-based food system, a food system that's really the land, what the land suggests, and the people that can connect within that web, that very small web, and build it in a happy way that people want to be participating and want to be consuming the food grown this way, and then see what happens. If our community can do that, and maybe another community over the hill, and maybe hundreds of communities around the country, that's the only way I can see going forward, just by example and by magical connectivity.
Right. And a big part of that, like you were talking about, even with Sutter Buttes and Central Valley, is the decimating effect of ranching I know here in Colorado, a lot of people are going back to bison and actually yak that aren't as destructive to the soil and to the environment. So I'm not trying to poo-poo, cattle ranching and that whole factory farming of food supply, but I think doing it in a way that's a little more conscious, where we're not destroying, tens of millions of acres of, agricultural rich soil and polluting watersheds by doing things that we found out 200 years later after we've colonized here that maybe they're not working. Maybe we have to innovate and pivot and look at doing things a different way. And definitely you're doing that in your community there in Yuba County.
Well, we have a neighbor of 6,000 acres who raises cattle and is doing it increasingly regeneratively, which means actually the soil is getting better every year. I think the only unconscionable thing with animals, I eat meat, and I feel like meat is part of a normal flow in a farm, partly because you need if you don't have animal waste, you're really struggling to get some nutrition that you ways to do it. And I'll say that in just a minute. But the only evil is the CAFOs, the concentrated, actually the concentration camps where they keep all the animals, whether it's chickens or cattle, animals living in an incredibly bad way with bad food, inhumanely, and then actually wasting the shit. It actually becomes a problem that destroys ecosystems and the streams and everything else. This fragmentation, where incorporating animals on farms is actually quite beautiful and makes the farm more alive. Just to tell one story about a small, I call it a farm, but really just a 40-tree apple orchard. It's not using animals. And how we went about planting it, this was just last year. It's a young man, wants to farm. We took land, we found, he has land, and it's up here in the foothills, mostly under black oaks, some gray pines. And our friend Yoshia, who's a bit of a shaman, came and kind of felt the land, partly understanding how the fungal systems, the trees are communicating with each other. This is more and more understood scientifically. She understands it through the kami. And we actually, instead of bulldoze over all the trees and planting the native trees and planting the apple trees, we started with the principle that we wanted to disturb the land as much as possible and see if the land would adopt the apples. We know that apples do very well here. You sometimes come across an old homestead from 100 years ago or more, and without being watered, the apples actually still survive from those times. So what we did is we sussed it out. We left some of the trees, as much of the brush as we could. And instead of carving into the land, we built on top of it. So we used some of the native materials to actually build terraces up. Instead of cutting terraces in, we built terraces up, and then we filled it with litter, leaf litter from the surrounding area. It was a bit of work, but if you can picture, instead of what typically people do is they cut a terrace and then they plant the tree, we actually built the terrace up and planted the tree on accumulated this duff, this material, which is incredibly rich in bacteria in particular and fungal matter, and it's native. So we built a native situation. So this is kind of tending again. It's halfway between farming and hunting and gathering. We used what was there to create a system where we invited the apples into the system. The apples seem like they're going to be fantastic. They're really happy. The land is happy. This young man is happy. And 40 apple trees can generate quite a bit of food, especially as we tend to want to use it for ciders and other things. It could be an income for him for the rest of his life if the world changes a little. Still there, Michael?
Yeah. I'm taking everything you're saying in. It's really, I understand this as a permaculture designer. We're very much about no-till farming. We're very much about, I know up on my property in Nevada County, we've done a huge restoration on the mountain of pollinators. A lot of people don't realize how important pollinators are as far as towards our food security. But it's just very interesting because, there's a natural intelligence in nature. And I think people like yourself and others, and even coming out of this ancient Japanese Shinto tradition, there's a lot of indigenous and traditional knowledge there to discover that can really benefit us. It's sometimes challenging to see how much faith people are putting into technology to save the world. And as we look towards nature, we realize actually that's probably the most perfect technology that there is. And a lot of the solutions are there. So yeah, I'm just taking everything you're saying in as I'm here in Crestone, Colorado, about to take on this property and this project, which is far from ideal for growing, but nonetheless has the basic principles. And I actually I interviewed a couple of days ago, John Michael Cohn from Tucson, who's actually doing an amazing project in the desert with starting a natural biosphere and a botanical garden with harvesting precipitation and humidity. And it's pretty fascinating. So, some people are blessed with idyllic situations to grow food and have water security, but others can be more challenging. So it's always inspirational to hear people's perspectives. And that's why I love doing this show, because I'm learning a lot. I get to meet brilliant people like you and Yoshia, and hopefully, our mycelial networks will start to intermingle as we implement more contributive efforts than extractive methods and technologies to fix some of these problems that we're facing as a global culture right now.
Mhm. Yeah, my principle at the end, Michael, is that in this land, like my friend Gabriel has, um, underneath the leaf litter, you can go and grab a piece of dirt like this. It's actually got billions of microbes, and those billions of microbes have, for I don't know how many eons, have been mining the soil for everything that the native plants need. What a wealth that's right there. The way farming that I was trained to do, you bulldoze all of that off, you clean away everything else, then you plant trees and you bring in amendments as though you're smarter, and they need nitrogen and phosphorus and potassium and magnesium and calcium, whatever. Whereas in fact, this incredible intelligence of the microbes, fungal in particular, are already doing all that work. And so to destroy in one day bulldozing what 10,000s of years built up seems the height of madness. And now that we understand these things, and we understand them more and more, build on that, tend that land, and encourage the land to invite more intensive production, not straight farming, but production that you can use in the land on the terms that the land is willing to accept. And I think the land is quite willing to accept the law, and it's quite resilient. And land that hasn't been heavily disturbed already is ready to be planted. No matter, I think we overestimate how difficult some land is to recover. Needs to be recovered using natural supplements that people want to pour in that have, and moisture.
Right. And we haven't even touched on the whole aspect of soil and water remediation. I know there's a lot of people doing fascinating work around that, but it's nice to kind of stay focused on this whole area that you're touching on today about our relationship to our environment, to soil, natural intelligence, working with all the invisible forces that also make up an environment and relationship to quality of our lives and quality of food. So, any final words of wisdom you would like to share with us? And then I don't know if you have a website that people could, maybe that they're interested in supporting you or find out more about your work, or how they can get involved, or anything that might help support your work or support the general community.
Well, I'm not looking for any particular help. I think everybody should lean in on what's local and realize that the most important people are the ones that you're living next to, and preach less and cook a little bit more and invite a friend over. So I guess those are my words of wisdom.
Simple, practical, and affordable knowledge. Love it. Love it. So, Stephen, thank you so much for your time to drop in and share some of your insights here on Solutionaries. Anyone watching this, I want to thank you for investing a little bit of time and energy into watching this content. We live in such a generation of media and information saturation. We really try to distill down these interviews and discourses with people and really get to ferret out, without being extractive, the jewels, the pearls of wisdom and knowledge that can help benefit all of us. So again, thank you for tuning in. And Stephen, thank you for your time. I would love to reach out to you at some point. We are going to be doing a regenerative gathering September 23rd, 4th, and 5th in Mount Shasta. If that resonates and you guys are in the neighborhood and interested, there's a lot of amazing regenerative land projects that are going on there. There's a lot of things that they're working with around food and water security, which is, of course, the headwaters of the Sacramento River. And but lots more happening. And I just want to thank you and tell Yoshia I said hello, and many blessings and appreciation for your time.
Thank you, Michael. We'll stay in touch.
Stay cool and have a great afternoon there in Yuba County. So thanks everyone for watching another episode of Solutionaries. Have a great day.